Hello, I'm Holly McNeil, the Mindfulness Architect, and welcome back to the second episode of Pay Attention. So, just to recap from the first episode, first of all, I want to thank you so much for joining me on this amazing journey. I talked about last time the quarter life crash that a lot of people are hitting in their late 20s and early 30s. And though it wasn't called back then, I certainly hit it at age 34, even though I had everything you could possibly want: career, family, pets, house, everything. I hit the wall, and I knew there had to be better. So I went off on this 20-year journey between 9/11 and the COVID pandemic to find that better. I believed there was better, and I found it. And I found these amazing, profound truths about how our mind works, how your mind works, and how you can change it. So thank you so much for joining me on this journey. Everything I do when I'm teaching people in my courses or talking at conferences or in this podcast, everything I'm doing just is a continuation of this amazing evolved journey that we're all on, known as life. And we're fortunate enough to have this human experience. So thank you for being here with me and growing. One of the most incredible things about my journey, one of the things I just love, 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 love. Like I said, I searched for 20 years across the country and from coast to coast. And in believing there was better, I didn't know my path when I started. I just knew there was better and I was open to it. And things started showing up, and they started showing up in as far back as 2004 with the movie What the Bleep Do We Know? We're talking about quantum physics and neuroscience. Things showed up in spirituality and in psychology. I had a couple of amazing therapists along the way. And then I practiced Buddhism for 5 years and lived in a Dharma house. And what I loved most about this journey, as I mentioned in the initial podcast, is that from millennial old wisdom to modern day thought leaders in all these modalities, they all pointed back to a few simple truths. And the first of those truths is that you are not your thoughts, emotions, and feelings, your habits, patterns, and defaults, that you are so much more. And understanding that, you can start to unravel it. You can start to unravel all those beliefs. And when you do, when you start to break through all of that, you'll start to see that there's no ego at the center. There's something so much more. There's the clarity of space that you create between all that chaos and who you truly are, where your wisdom, unconditional love, and compassion comes through. So my plan is, like I said, to bring on guests who can back me up on this. So let's go through them one by one. So neuroscience. Neuroscience talks about, Dr. Joe Dispenza tells us how nerve cells that fire together, wire together, making anything we think about over and over again, whether consciously or subconsciously, but consistently, seem very solid and very real. It creates a neuronet of relationships to each other that becomes so thick and so concretized that we can't see past it, that we take it on as who we are. We believe there's nothing more. Literally, at this point, you cannot see beyond the lens of your experiences. But in this movie, and I love Dr. Joe Dispenza, he talks about how nerve cells that no longer fire together, no longer wire together, and that you have a choice. You have a choice that when these patterns come up, you can look at them, you can question them. And as I said in the initial podcast, it starts by paying attention, by creating the habit of watching the mind. Because if you're not watching it, you're on autopilot. And these patterns and habits and behaviors, most of which are negative, as the mind has a negative bias, continue to get stronger and stronger. But you can look at them. And when you let them be, when you don't engage with these thoughts, these nerve cells that no longer fire together, no longer wire together, creating gaps in that neural net and space for your wisdom and clarity to come through. I talk about kind of getting off that thoughts, emotions, feelings highway, stepping back and letting the traffic clear a little bit and see what you find there. So that points to when you start to break that apart, you find that there's no ego there. Even the identity of who you are is a thought and a concept. When you were born, I was not Holly. You were not named you, but you were told you are Holly, or you are whoever you were told. And I am Holly, and this is who you are, and this is where you live. But when you break that apart, you find that there's so much more to who you truly are, to your true nature. When you realize that you are not your thoughts, you are the one observing them, which leads me to spirituality, which is where I actually started my journey. In the first book I ever read, like I said, when I started my journey, I had no idea where I was going, but things started showing up. I walked into a Barnes and Noble across the state. I was away on business, and on the table was a book, and it said, "Stand Up for Your Life." It's by Cheryl Richardson. And in the introduction, it says, when you ask the universe for change, it will rock your world. Be careful what you ask for, because your mind is that powerful. And things, you'll be sent the right people, situations, and events to help you along your way. Adyashanti talks about in one of his books that everyone is on a trajectory back to their true nature. That if you look at the obstacles in your life as a teacher, as showing you something that you're caught in, a thought or a habit or pattern that you're caught in, that your true awareness is caught in, you can look at them as lessons. I'll go into my story more as we go into these podcasts, but for 8 years after my divorce, I was struggling to hold on to my children, to prevent my alienation from them, because I was reliving my childhood as the parent. I had been alienated from my father, and I knew what that does to children. And it was very difficult, and I had to be very strong in front of my children. And when the cops showed up, when there was mishaps and misunderstandings dealing with my ex-husband, and I was very strong in front of them. But as soon as they shut the door and they were gone, I would fall to pieces on the floor. But every time I picked myself up, I would see things a little differently. So I know that I needed those 8 years to help me unravel all of the thoughts and patterns of low self-worth and disgusting and shameful that I had created around myself. And I did. I started to question those things and to listen to the teachings, the spiritual teachings, and to realize that again, we are not our thoughts, emotions, and feelings, that we are the one observing them. Eckhart Tolle says there's a huge realm of intelligence beyond thought. And that's who we are, that essence, that soul that observes and creates from inside, creates the outside from inside. I also practiced, like I said, then I got to the East Coast, and life's amazing. Everything shows up. I was working as an architect, and I Googled meditation near me, and within 1 mile of my of my work, was a meditation class. And I went to the class, and it was, the teacher was from the New Kadampa tradition, a Buddhist tradition. And it was a great class on compassion. And I went back the next week, and I heard someone talking, and they said, "Do you have any deeper courses than this?" And the teacher said, "We have just finished a 5-year course on Joyful Path, and we're starting a new book in 2 weeks." And so I joined that class, and that book was called The New Heart of Wisdom. And it was all about emptiness, the biggest teaching in Buddhism, the fact that everything, that our minds are empty like space, have no form or color, but have this amazing power to perceive. Again, pointing back to the fact that we are not our thoughts, emotions, and feelings. We're not our habits. that this world, this amazing world, was created from emptiness. And again, science backs that up when you take a look at the quantum field. And when you look at everything that's so solid, like this book and these glasses and this person, and you look down at the cellular level, and then you go down to the atom, and then you go down to the neutrons and protons, and even below that, you see waves of particles flashing in and out of existence, energy coming in and out, little wavelets of energy that are even beyond our understanding, that have somehow come together in such a way that they seem solid and they seem real. But even science tells us that they're empty, that they move in and out of existence. The fact that we're here is a freaking miracle, and every day is a blessing. And when we start to unravel our neuronet and to look at this emptiness and understand how we are here, it just opens up a whole different realm of possibility. You can never find permanent happiness and peace in your mind, as I explained in the initial episode. It's just this crazy, madhouse of constant thoughts, emotions, and feelings. And our ego, right? When we're born, we have 360-degree personalities, but we're born into this world where we're immediately slapped on the butt and we're screaming and we're hungry. And so we go to work right away as this awareness to create this ego, this who we are, to be okay, to protect us. And then, we're okay. We got mom and dad here, and I'm okay. And then all of a sudden, dad's gone, and the whole thing goes wacko. And we consistently spend our entire lives trying to keep this outside world the same to be okay, instead of realizing what happened, what we did, and that we can undo that. And underneath it, we are more than okay. We are, beyond words. That in your heart, when you can quiet the mind and you find that essence of who you are, that is where your permanent happiness and peace is going to be found. And yeah, so I moved across the country at age 49. I packed up everything and moved into a Dharma house in San Francisco. A year later, I retired down to Southern California, where the last piece of this amazing puzzle came together. Again, as an architect, my job was to take all these pieces and to put them together in a way that are clear and straightforward. And I'm reading a book that I had read 10 years into my journey called You Can Be Happy No Matter What by Dr. Richard Carlson. And I had picked it up again, about 20 years into this journey. And you change every day. So I certainly got stuff out of that book 10 years into the journey. But this time I noticed a small footnote at the bottom that it's called You Can Be Happy No Matter What, 5 Principles to Happiness or something like that. And this footnote says that, oh, by the way, the first 4 of these principles were come from a book with the unfortunate title of Sanity, Insanity, and Common Sense, a brand new approach to happiness, written by Dr. Enrique Suarez and his colleagues back in the 1980s. Now, I get it. The 1980s were 40 years ago, and we want to stay current. But Dr. Carlson, who wrote Don't Sweat the Small Stuff, very popular in self-help, thought that this was important, and not only published the book, the original book, Sanity, Insanity, and Common Sense, went out of publication in 1990, but he published in 95 and 99 and again in 2006 because the world needed this information. And he unfortunately passed away quickly after that. And certainly the Don't Sweat the Small Stuff series overpowered maybe that book. But the information, I got a copy of the Insanity, and Common Sense, and I'm reading it. And it talks about psychology and the science of psychology, and how some people have kind of never really taken psychology serious, because most other sciences, math, biology, neuroscience, has a set of principles, of functions that are always true, that has a common denominator, where if you add this together, if you add 2 numbers together, you will get the sum of those numbers. There's formulas and basis that proves this science to be true. And he talks about how we do in psychology have a common denominator, and that is our ability to think. That is the fact that we can think is the common denominator, and really the only requirement to self-realization. Ultimately, it's not thinking, but paying attention and taking a look at these habits and patterns and unraveling them is the key to liberation. And he talks about these laws of transformation that our minds create, because our minds are meant to protect our programming, that all new ideas must pass through. I talked about them in the initial podcast. And I'm sitting there looking at this and just, I was blown away, because these laws of transformation talk about how new ideas are altered and discarded, and that we are looking through the lens of these laws. We are looking through the lens of our past, and if we start to back away from it, we, in what I now call the awareness camp rather than the entanglement camp, you can see your thoughts and habits and patterns from a distance, and then they don't affect you as much, and you start to realize this clarity of space and this amazing truth about who you are. And in looking at that and realizing that it pointed back exactly to everything else I looked at, it was a final piece in the puzzle. And it's exactly then when I printed out a book proposal and I looked over it and I could see this path to clarity, that all of these modalities back up. And again, my plan is to bring guests on to not prove this to you, but just to reinforce what I'm talking about. It blew me away I'm an architect, right? I didn't know this stuff. And then when they all started pointing back, it just blew me away. And it became a part of my course that I teach, simple and obvious, which I know can upset people, because it's, the world of mental health is so complicated. But I've created a set of mindfulness meditation practices known as Pure Love, in which I teach all of these modalities and what I've learned. The first 3 practices, pledge, evaluate, recognize, are the cerebral part of the formula, where you pledge to make the habit of watching your mind, evaluate the habits or the patterns and habits that you've stuffed away in your long black bag, and then recognize them as they come up in your daily life. And those first 3 practices, I think, are kind of the missing piece to clarity, to mental health. It's that straightforward, because then those then lead to the love practices, the more spiritual part of the formula, where you locate that space that remains when the thoughts, emotions, and feelings, I call it your TEF, are subsided. When you drop into your heart, you open your heart to feel this amazing flow of energy that you are. You then invest in what you find there, the unconditional love, the universal compassion, and infinite wisdom. And finally, E, expanding beyond your conditioned limits. So it's a very beautiful journey to be on, and it's doable, and the only requirement is your humanity. And so over the next episodes, I'll bring in people from these different modalities that we will talk about these things with. And I love it. And again, it's an evolution of my journey and hopefully part of yours. So thank you so much for being here again. I will also bring in people to talk about their own stories, their own journeys of hitting this wall, hitting this quarter life crisis, getting stuck and lost, wondering how they got there, and finding their way out. There's many paths back to your true nature. Her love is just one of them. And so I'll be bringing other guests on as well to talk about their stories and their findings. Because if you believe there's more for you out there, you don't have to know how to get there. The mind is that powerful. And the mind brought you to this podcast of Pay Attention. So thank you again for being here with me. I hope to see you. I hope you listen to future podcasts and reach out and let me know if you have any questions. Again, I'm Holly McNeil, the Mindfulness Architect. Namaste.